Eduardo's everywhere. Yeah, it's on my skin and in my hair. Louise, I think I'm falling for you. Might go down easy. This is my Cayman review. Might go down easy. This is my Cayman review. Might go down easy. This is my Cayman review. Oh, you gotta love it. Let's hear it for Bob Adelman on the guitar. Woo! And let's hear it for Dave Amlin on the bass guitar.
Which song is this? What's it called? Blaze? Yeah.
Hello. I'm sorry I'm late.
Climb that hill, stay on your feet. Scramble for your footing when it gets too steep. You're on the highway now with higher hopes. We're all around our rolling eggs and living yolks. You never get too sad, you never get too blue. It must be all those chemtrails raining down on you. The justice of the peace can't help you anymore. And they just took the covers of the justice of war. You got your nice shades on, and the worst days are gone. So now the band plays on. You got one life plays on. You got one life plays on, and the worst days are gone. So now the band plays on. You got one life plays on. God will forgive you. The storm is passing through. Lay down your sticks and stones. The trouble's over now. We're all just flesh and bones. We were wrong before. It was wrong to trust. The shadows cast is only light and dust. And then one day you'll find to your intense delight that 3 wrong turns can't really make a right. So why not be like me? Be proud of all your crimes. 'Cause when I screw up once, I do it 2 more times. You got your nice shades on, and the worst days are gone. So now the band plays on. You got one life plays on. You got one nice shades on, and the worst days are gone. You got the band plays on. You got one life plays on. And we'll be dancing in the fields, running through the moor, tripping on the barbed wire, buried near the shore, blazing like a comet, brighter than the full moon. So you better get ready, 'cause the train is coming soon. I met a liar called the Messiah. I got a frying pan, I wanted fire. I got a red dress, I met a daughter. I got the quicksand, I pray for water. You got your nice shades on,
and the worst days are gone. You know the band plays on. You got one life, plays on. You got your nice shades on, and the worst days are gone. So now the band plays on. You got one life, plays on.
Blaze on.
Blaze on, blaze on. Blaze on,
Blaze on.
blaze on,
Blaze on. Yeah.
blaze on, blaze on,
Blaze on.
blaze on, blaze on, blaze on,
Ooh.
blaze on, blaze on.
Oh yeah, sing it, Canton Mare. That. All right, good job blazing on. Are you all ready to set your soul free? Yes. All right, if you are, put your hands up in the air. Yeah, set your soul free. Yeah. Trying to share what it's all about. Let the music do the talking, it'll help you out. Stay up for days, don't get down. Roll with the funk now, turn it around.
Burn it down, set your soul free. We're all here together in a spirit family. Everybody's dancing, everyone can see. Burn it down,
Set your soul free,
set your soul free.
On the go, I'm singing this song. Been digging my grave, and it won't be long.
Won't be long.
Take a little trip, feel a little rain, aim a little higher, ignore the pain. Burn it down,
Burn it down, set your soul free. We're all here together in a spirit family. Everybody's dancing, everyone can see. Burn it down, set your soul free.
Set your soul, set your soul free. Set your soul free.
Set your soul free.
Set your
soul free.
soul free. Burn it
down, set your soul free. Everybody, we're all here together in a spirit family. Everybody's dancing, everyone can see. Burn it down, set your soul free.
Set your soul free. Set your soul free. Set your soul free. Set your soul free. Set your soul. Set your soul. Soul free. Set your soul free.
Set your soul.
Set your soul free.
Set your soul.
Set your soul free.
Set your soul. Set your soul. Set your soul. So free.
Set your soul free. Set your soul free.
Set your soul.
Set your soul.
Set your soul. Set your soul free. Set your soul free. Set your soul.
Oh yeah. Set your
soul free. I'm ready. I'm waiting.
Dave Hamlin on that bass.
Woo! set your soul free. We're all here together in the spirit family. Everybody's dancing, everyone can see. Burn it down, set your soul free. Set your soul free. This is going to be audience participation, so pay attention.
That means you. And you. No, not yet. Not yet.
You can start by clapping.
This crazy world I know. It turns, and the long night goes, and the sun coming up. This world, this crazy world I know. It turns, and the lights on low, and the lights going up. This crazy world I know. It turns, and the long night's over, and the lights coming up. This world, na 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 na. Yeah, be alright. Na 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 na. Yeah, it's gonna be alright. Na 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 na, join us. Na 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 na. Yeah, it's gonna be alright. Na 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 na. Na 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 na, yeah, it's gonna be alright, alright, oh yeah, all night over and the sun going up. Na na na, it's gonna be alright. All right. Give me a second. No, I'm not. Well, get ready. Where's the guitar? Do we have time for one more? Is that what you just got? Yeah, rise. Okay. Rise. If you're able. All right, I'll just go like that. Okay. Or like this. Okay.
She just made it. Oh, okay. It's just that the words are very simple.
No, all we're doing is we're just doing
Rise up. Rise up. Got it. So that's in a little while.
Okay. Here's some more TNTers that we know and love. It's our last song here. The ocean is only a lot of drops of water, and the land is only a lot of grains of sand. And the people of the world all love the same way. We're gonna break down the walls one day and come together, come together, come together. high above, we're all the same down here. Without a map, the lines all disappear. We're so tired of our senseless fight. The one thing we can all do right is come together, come together, come together, come together, come together. We're all looking for a little more love to shine a light and lift us up. When you hold me heartbeat to heartbeat, I'm a part of you and you're a part of me, and we rise up and come together, come together, come together. Rise up, come together, come together, come together. We're all looking for a little more love to shine a light and lift us up. When you hold me heartbeat to heartbeat, I'm a part of you and you're a part of me. I'm a part of you. You're a part of me. I'm a part of you. You're a part of me. Rise up, come together, come together, come together. Rise up, come together, come together, come together. Rise up, come together, come together, come together. sing now. Ooh, your souls rise up. Ooh, you got to rise up. Yeah. Ooh, I can feel it rise up. Ooh, one last time. Rise up.
I mean, at Ner Tamid, we don't just do a show, we do a pre-show.
Can I say one?
I wanted to say thank you,
Go ahead.
but go, do your thing.
Okay, so just one quick minute before we get into a really wonderful conversation coming up. First of all, thank you, Lisa Westreich, Naomi Serlin, Amy Plout, Rachel Pogge, and Joan Marie Coulter for our backup singers for the last tune. Thank you guys so much. It's fantastic. One other thing I wanted to say, my wife and I are kind of new to the Phish world, maybe about 7 years. So we got into Phish, and some of the tunes that we've been, I can actually do this. Some of the tunes we've been playing tonight were from the Trey Anastasio band, which we really love that band. It's a kind of a side project of Trey's. He's been doing it for about 25 years. And I just wanted to mention, in the 7 years that we've been following that band, 2 of the members actually have unfortunately passed away. But I wanted to just mention them because I was really inspired by the band, and they were, a big part of the inspiration. And the 2 people that passed away were James Casey, who played baritone sax with them, and Tony Markellis, who was a fantastic bass player, played with all kinds of bands, and was a great contributor to this band. So shout out to them, and thanks everybody.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Awesome. I don't think I've ever seen a Trey band cover band. That's pretty awesome. I got a lot of questions for that, and they're all yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing. Check, check.
I think you guys are ahead of the curve, but now there's you could go see like Jerry Garcia band cover bands and stuff like that. So I think one day there'll be Tab cover bands all over the place. This is the first one. I love it.
And what an honor. Testing, testing. What an honor to see you in this beautiful sanctuary. It's really special. Can't wait to be here with the sun shining through those amazing windows. No?
Yeah, we're good. What's your 5? All right,
Yes.
you should be good, as long as it's close.
Testing. There we go. I generally don't need one of these, so.
Should be good. Try it one more time.
Again? Okay. Whoa. That might be a little bit much for everyone.
No, it's perfect.
It's a little reverb.
Yeah.
A little reverb.
It's a little hot right now. All right. You're 5 and you are
2.
2.
Whoa.
Yes, you are definitely too hot. All right, I think we got it. Welcome everybody. Everybody can hear? All right. So this is, by the way, this is the brainchild of Andrew Slutsky and Justin Baez. Where are they? Can you guys stand up? So about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, they approached me and they said, look, we just came from this Phish show, and the craziest thing happened. We ran into basically everybody we knew from Temple Ner Tamid. They were like, it was like a high holidays. Like, I don't understand. And it happened that this book was coming out, and they knew that this book was coming out. And so we decided that we were going to try to unpack the question, why is it that Phish was basically a Temple Ner Tamid reunion? And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to get a chance, I'm going to ask you guys a few questions to try to kind of unpack the question about not only why is it that Jews love Phish so much, but also how is Phish, in a way, a kind of religious experience, and how does it mimic what we do here in these walls? So before we officially start, I want to just take a poll. If you've been to at least one Phish show, stand up.
Excellent showing.
Yeah.
All right. If stay standing. If you've been to 5 Phish shows or more, stay standing. If you've been to 25 Phish shows or more, stay standing. If you've been to 100 Phish shows or more, stay standing. If you've been to 200 or more Phish shows, stay standing. I'm gonna stop there. That is impressive. That is impressive.
We're not going to 250? Come on.
Yeah. You win the night. You win the night. So Ariella Worden Greenfield, Mike Greenhouse. Ariella is the editor of this amazing book. I'm going to hold it up for everybody to see. This is your song too, Phish and Contemporary Jewish Identity. We're going to be selling it later tonight. So Ariel is one of the co-editors. Mike is one of the contributors to the book, both of which are big Phish fans. And so, and this book, by the way, is really genre defying. On the one hand, it is scholarly and cites really amazing sources. On the other hand, you hear from Phish heads and Phish fans who are just talking about the meaning of it from their Jewish identities. And so there's personal elements, there's scholarly elements. It's a different kind of scholarly book than probably you've ever read before. And so I've got a number of questions for you. And the first really is, why is Phish so Jewish?
We'll certainly be able to cover that in our time this
Yes. So 26%, according to your book, though in the book you cite the fact that most Phish fans say 30% just anecdotally. But studies have shown you go to a Phish show anywhere in the country, odds are 26% of the people at the show are Jewish. You know, besides like a Modest Yahoo concert, like that has to be like one of the highest percentage of Jewish fans of any concert. So why? Like why are 26% of the people in the audience Jewish at a Phish show?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having Ariella and I here. This has been an amazing time already. We love the Tab cover band, and I have to say, kibitzing during the set breaks of Phish shows is one of my favorite pastimes, and it's always so great to see friends and former colleagues and whatnot there. So it's something that we've noticed as well. To kind of quote the title of my essay in the book, which is a line from the in Phish lore, the prophet McGrupp. It's really all seasons and reasons. There's a lot of reasons why there's such a huge percentage of people at Phish shows who are Jewish. But I'll start by talking a little bit about some of the geographic and cultural. I know there's a lot of people here who have seen a lot of Phish shows, so some of this they might know, but for those of you who maybe don't know a little bit about their history, you know, Phish is what is called a jam band. That scene really grew out of the Bay Area in the 1960s, came out of the Beat Poet movement with the Grateful Dead, at Jefferson Airplane, Santana. Down in the Southeast, there was kind of a parallel thing going on with the Allman Brothers and Marshall Tucker Band and a lot of those groups. That being said, and the Northeast is really where all those bands came to roost. They would host multi-night runs at venues like the Fillmore. They would tour up and down. You know, Ariella and I both went to Skidmore College together. We could talk about that in a little bit. all the bands that we just talked about, either their members or the bands themselves played shows there, and a lot of the other college towns as well. And one of the reasons is that in the Northeast especially, and also in the Southeast, the big cities are really close together. So if you're a touring band, and all these bands really not only made their money touring, but each show is a unique experience. They're jamming, they are changing their set list up every night. It's not a scripted show. So they wanted an area where they could go from city to city, and people would follow them. They could go from Boston to New York to DC and around, and they could have a unique experience. So all these bands really always made a point to come to the Northeast and come to the Southeast, even if they were based in other areas of the country, because if you look at even the way Phish tours now on the West Coast, it's a big drive, and it's a big schlep, if you will, to get from the Gorge in Seattle down to San Diego or wherever they might play. And especially in the 80s and 90s, when Phish was coming through the ranks, that these areas had very large pockets of Jewish people, especially in college campuses and prep schools. And Phish, who originally formed the University of Vermont, got their start playing colleges and prep schools and other kind of community centers in all these towns. They would go all around New England. They would play in New York. They would go all the way down to Florida even. And that's really, I think, a major reason why they tapped into these pockets of Jewish culture. And we could talk a little bit about why the music might have appealed to people who have that religious and spiritual background. But as people, when Phish would come to a college town or a city, and people were really, really became like disciples of them. They would tape the shows, they would record the set lists, and then they would go back, especially if they were in college or boarding school, to go back to where they're from and be like, hey, this great band came, here's a tape of what it is, and you should check it out. And then they passed it along, and then maybe those people were on the college board at the music committee at their school, and they'd get the band to play the next semester. We have a little AV.
We're gonna get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this band, and we're going to see a beautiful image of them in 1 minute. And they are playing at venues around the Northeast. We have a concentration of Jewish residents in that area. We have a concentration of Jewish students at these liberal arts colleges, these small colleges along the seaboard. And we also have something else happening. 2 members of this band were raised in Jewish households. John Fishman, who is wearing a lovely donut-covered muumuu. If you look around the room, you might spot some donuts. So he was raised in a Jewish household, as was the bassist Mike Gordon, who you see wearing some sort of splattery, animal printish blazer. And so this is meaningful for a lot of listeners who are witnessing Jewishness enacted on stage. These are not the only Jewish musicians who were coming up at the time that Phish was really gaining popularity. And yet they integrated their Jewishness. They didn't shy away from it. They leaned into it in ways that were profoundly meaningful for an audience of listeners who were without maybe a Jewish anchor in the popular culture arena. Now, I'll take you back for a quick trip down memory lane to Adam Sandler's Hanukkah song. Do you remember when that song came out? You could not escape it. I was so pumped about it. Having the opportunity to mention all of these famous people who were Jewish was exciting to me. It was thrilling. It was a chance to acknowledge myself as an American Jew in a new way, as a part of American popular culture. So that's a big thing, right? So what is it about these guys that is Jewish? How are they more overtly Jewish? Why do they not need a Hanukkah song? So a couple reasons. I'll just say they're countercultural, right? And that in and of itself opens up questions about Jewish connections. And with your permission, I'll save that piece of where we're going for a little bit later in the conversation. But we do have a band that is not really leaning into what's expected of a popular band, right? You're not gonna hear a Phish song on the radio because sometimes they're like 30 minutes and their hooks are not necessarily gonna play well for an audience because they're singing about things that could be interpreted as nonsensical. You know, one of their most popular songs is about going to see a movie and getting dinner, and the lyrics simply are, let's go out to dinner and see a movie, right? So like, we're dealing with the band that's being playful, and they're playful in their music, they're experimental, so that experimentation not only leans into a Jewish interest in counterculture, which Mike talked about a moment ago, but it also creates space for meditation and exploration in a religious or spiritual realm. And that is something we're going to get to in a minute. Before we get to that spiritual space that the band's opening up, I want to get really concrete. Okay, these are two Jewish guys that are a part of a band, and the band is committed to enhancing and celebrating the diverse members of their group. And one of the ways they do that is by playing Avinu Malkeinu. So they play Avinu Malkeinu, which is pretty profoundly Jewish, wouldn't you say? Totally unexpected song to hear in a music venue, right? We expect to hear the prayer, this extreme, profound supplication, right, within a space like this. And so what does it mean for someone like me who went to see Phish when she was 13 years old with a group of her friends and heard Avinu Malkeinu at her first show? My mind was blown. I was like, I found my people, I'm never going home. And then my dad picked me up, you know, so like I went home. But that is a pretty profound moment. And I want to just focus for a second on a very different way that the band has created space for Jewish fans. Right here we have a hot dog, and I don't know if you want to tell the story of that hot dog.
That's a kosher hot dog, literally. So on New Year's, the band always in something that almost parallels, you know, high holidays or some other days that are sacred where people gather in community. You know, Phish's New Year's show is something that people travel from all over the country to come to, no matter where they live. And they always have what they call the gag. It's like a special thing they do as the ball drops, and they've become increasingly Broadway-esque. Trey, the lead singer, has a background in Broadway, so they bring in different props and different people. And one of their earliest and most famous gags was I think their original idea was they wanted to somehow reach the people at the back of this huge arena they were playing. And the way they figured to do it is, you know, they're at this sports arena, they're gonna create a scene that recalls, you know, the snacks you would get at a sports game, and that included a hot dog like this one. So the band actually loaded into this, and then they flew it all around the Boston Garden, and they got to play music for people up in those upper levels. And they've revived it a few times on New Year's Eve into the millennium in Florida, and then again at the Garden. And now it sits in the Rock Hall of Fame here. And before they did that first time, they actually did have a rabbi come in and bless this hot dog. So it is a completely kosher hot dog. And I think that goes back to, as Aurelia was saying, Mike Gordon, who, along with John Fishman, is Jewish. And one thing to pick up what she was saying is when Phish was coming through the ranks, there wasn't social media as we know it now, but them and some of the other jam bands of their time were almost like had like this pre-social media connection with their audience where there was really no barrier and people just kind of looked at them like they were real people. Like you could look, oh, you know, where are they from? What are their background? Oh, he's Jewish, he's Irish, he's this, he's that. How does that all connect? Oh, I'm like that too. And there was a kind of a really deep bond and connection that I think was another reason why people were so impassioned when they followed them and felt so connected to them.
So speaking of Mike Gordon, I'd like to take another poll, if I may. Yeah. Okay. For those of you who can't see, I am wearing a cactus pin. How many of you would assume that I'm wearing this because I like Santa Fe or, you know, somewhere with lovely cactuses? Okay. How many of you got it? All right, so Mike Gordon's nickname is Cactus. And I wore this pin because I happened to look at all my pins the other day and I said to myself, I really should start wearing these. But no, I wore it because I wanted to kind of demonstrate the way that Phish fans signal each other and the layered meaning that is available within the Phish ecosphere. So we looked a moment ago at a picture of John Fishman's Mumo. The second you walked in the door this evening, I saw your socks and I was like, we can hug it out, let's go for lunch, we're best friends. And that was meaningful when I saw that. If I wore this pin to a Phish concert, 90% of the people there, I would assume, maybe 70, would get it, right? And so there's a lot of that signaling that happens in Phish, and the band actually offers kind of these layers of meaning, but fans also really buy into this secret language that the band actually cultivated. I'll let you talk about that in a minute, by wearing garb that identifies them as Jewish and Phish aligned. And we're gonna get to see some of those images later, but I think it's important to start talking about the way that the band creates space for Jewish fans and the way that the fans create space for themselves to be Jewish at Phish so that they can go with their friends from Shul and celebrate and feel this sense of themselves as holistically present.
So I want to talk actually about another group that goes to Phish shows. So they're almost a subgroup of Jews. So I first encountered Phish at Jewish summer camp. Raise your hand if you are around my demographic and you encountered Phish at Jewish summer camp for the first time. So I remember listening. I had a counselor who had Hoist and listening to it. And I remember coming home and buying Junta and listening to that on repeat over and over again, which are two Phish albums for those who don't know. And I do remember that, you know, that when I've only been to like one or two Phish shows, but when I was at the show, I first went with my rabbinical school classmates, but I then ran into a few people from camp. And so one of the essays in the book, one of the actually opening essays in the book, which I thought was like a really prescient and thoughtful account, is the fact that I want to get back there to that camp experience, and that there's very hard to recreate that. And the author very cogently talked about the fact that Phish shows lets people like me get back into camp. And I'm curious if you can just talk a little bit about the Jewish summer camp scene and the overlap with Phish and why it is that those two things mesh so well together.
I would love to. I also have to just call attention to the fact that you said I've only been to one or two Phish shows. And like, that's a significant number. There's this well-known poet, Andrew Lustig, who did a tour of like Jewish federations and synagogues several years ago when he came out with his poem, I Am Jewish. Has anyone heard of it? So this poem, which is quite interesting and lengthy, talks about getting kind of contemporary with Jewish identity. One of the lines is, "I just got a chai tattoo," right? So it's not an old school poem. But one of the other lines in the poem is, "I'm going to all 3 Phish shows next weekend." Now, when I called Andrew Lustig and I said, "Tell me you're such a big fan, I can't wait to connect," he's like, "Well, actually, I don't really even like Phish that much." So the fact that you're like, "I've only been to 1 or 2" is kind of representative of this en masse celebration of a band that causes us to feel like we're not doing our due diligence if we've only been 1 or 2 times.
What's interesting, by the way, is that might be the biggest overlap that we've said all night about the inadequate Phish fan and the inadequate Jew, which I think every Jew feels like they aren't enough.
Yeah.
So back to camp. I mean, let's talk about where we all feel the most adequate, where we all feel the most celebrated. So I did not discover Phish at camp. I had a cousin who introduced me to the band. And yet, there's something that links up with the camp experience within my very reception of the music. So camp is this space that's out of time, right? It's out of our everyday experience. We're without our parents. Are you kidding me? This is the best. There's no homework. There's no regular set of rules that we have to adhere to. Yes, you have to be, kind of aware of the policy when your lights have to be out, but let's be real, you're not really asleep. So this space in which there's so much freedom for young people to discover themselves, to be with their peers, and to learn from people a couple years older than them, that is such a powerful space for potent growth, right? And when it's a Jewish summer camp and Phish is being passed down to campers by their counselors, there's a real linkage that happens within those recipients, right? So that's one thing that I think is worth mentioning, right? When you're receiving a musical tradition, which I'm going to call Phish a musical tradition, within this space that is Jewish, that makes a difference. But beyond that, there's ruach at camp, right? Are you with me? There's ruach. There's so much light and joy and passion, and we're singing together, and we're in community, and we're around a fire. And where do we go to tap into ruach as adults? Where do we go? Many people come to synagogue, right? To feel that charged energy. And many of those same people and many others go to Phish. So one other thing that I want to just share, and then I'll pass it over to you to maybe tell our story. The passing down from the counselors to the campers, and then they become counselors and pass down to the campers, echoed, of course, in my cousin sharing that silly song, Contact, about tires on a road. Mm-hmm. Shared another ridiculous song with me when I was like 12. The passing down, L'Ador Vador, is so impactful, and it really does shape why camp becomes this profound space for Jewish connection and also for Phish-based connection.
It's interesting you mentioned Contact. I first heard about Phish when I was at camp, actually. Fee, which I like the joke, was their hit single, which was not a single or a hit, was the first song that I heard there. And both that and Contact and a lot of those really early Phish songs were almost had this kind of like bizarro nursery rhyme quality to it, which I think plays into the oral tradition that you guys were just touching on. And I know we're talking about Phish today, but we could get a little interfaith and talk about the Grateful Dead for a second. We're doing this at Relics. We're doing this this special Phish tribute issue coming up. So obviously, we sadly lost him a few weeks ago, and people were talking about why he left such an impact, not only as a bassist, but just kind of as a cultural leader. And he had a place called Terrapin Crossroads out in Marin County where he lived, and he would have all sorts of younger musicians come and play with him, or older musicians who maybe weren't necessarily associated with the Dead or the Dead's music. And he would kind of teach them about it. And this musician who we interviewed described it as almost like he was telling a children's story, and that you needed that oral tradition. You needed someone to actually say it to you and read it to you. It's not something you could just like look up on the internet or even like read in a songbook. It was something about the way someone presents it to you that makes you feel really like attached to it and the memories when you first heard of it. And I think that really plays into why myself and probably a lot of people in this room first heard about Phish at camp. And another place that I think people really discover Phish, and this plays into how we first became friends, is college. When you go to college, or at least when I went to college, as I mentioned, we went to Skidmore. You're looking to find a community. You're looking to meet people. It's besides camp, probably the first time that you lived away from home. And of course, you're gonna look for people who have either shared interests or some sort of shared background as your initial connections, because there's kind of a natural kinship there. So the way we met, which I feel like plays into all the signifiers we've touched on today, is the summer after my freshman year of college, which is the summer before Ariella's. We both grew up in Westchester. I was at a local pizza place with my brother, and I had a Phish shirt on, and I had a Skidmore College keychain. And Ariella was working there, and she noticed Phish and Skidmore, and she said, "I'm going to be there next year. We're going to be friends." And here we are, 30 years later, we're friends. There was something really special about that. Is that like she felt comfortable just saying hi to me and my brother, two random people, because she knew that we had these two things in common. And I think that that's something that is unique for not just jam bands, but any band that kind of has this grassroots cult following, whether it's like the Ramones or even on a bigger level, the Stones. You're like, you know what? You've probably been at some of the same shows as me. You've listened to the same music and shared all this stuff.
Yeah, when we were talking, you were like, "So tell me the Phish show that you went to." And so I was like, "Well, it was maybe sometime when I was in rabbinical school, so it was between 2009 and 2012, and it was at the Garden, and it wasn't the summer, but it wasn't New Year's Eve." And you're like trying to narrow it down. You're like, "I think I might have been at that show too." And so there is something to be said for sure about that.
Yeah.
I want to talk spirituality for a second. So one of the essays in the book talked about the fact that there are different modalities of spirituality at the shows. And they talked about the fact that, this again is countercultural, that at a show that normally you would go to, you have your phone out, right? And the point is to be like taping what's going on so you can Instagram it later. And this was saying actually there's a fair amount of people that like leave their phones in the car so they can be fully present at the show, which in a way feels very Shabbadistic, right? It feels like a Friday night service where we ask you to leave your phones in your pockets and put them on silent and just be completely present. And that's because Phish shows are a spiritual experience. And so I'm curious if you can kind of unpack the spirituality of a Phish show and what it is about the Phish show that does connect people to something bigger than themselves. Because for many people, going to Phish shows are prayerful, even if it's not the prayers that you expect at a service.
Or maybe one sneaks in, right?
Or maybe one sneaks in, yes.
So with your permission, I'll set the scene so we can really dig into spirituality. I'll read half a page. Though listening to a recording or reading about the band can provide a window into the world of Phish, the best way to fully understand the Phish phenomenon is through the live experience. A Phish show is more than a concert. It is a performative spectacle, one that invites attendees to become participants. Phish shows provide an opportunity not only to see and hear a talented rock band play exceptional music, but also to immerse oneself in a carnivalesque atmosphere that eschews the normalcy of everyday life. Some fans dress in elaborate costumes and some paint their faces. Others wear their most sparkly attire. Some sport dreadlocks and patchwork clothing, though admittedly less frequently today than in the 1990s when the band experienced a stratospheric rise to fame. Instead of strapping on high heels or loafers, fans don their favorite kicks for a night of dancing. Even those who wear street clothes to shows might opt to add an element of festive attire before heading to a concert. Others are gifted flair mid-show from people they have never met. Fans bestow strangers with gifts of decorated Uno cards, homemade stickers, and pins as they pass joints and vape pens. Concert goers share glow sticks and other things with friends old and new in an environment where excess is the dominant mode of being. The visual impact of the crowds and their embellished outfits is enhanced by the smells of a Phish show. Cannabis smoke fills the air and commingles with the scent of sweaty, gyrating fans, many of whom wear patchouli natural deodorant, if any at all. The prevalence of mind-altering substances is in and of itself jarring. Drug and alcohol use are rampant at Phish shows, as many fans indulge to enhance their musical and bodily experience. People move in uninhibited ways, twirling and bopping in free-form step. For such fans, drugs encourage such release. Others need no chemical encouragement to shed the expectations of general society and join in the groove.
That was a beautiful description of the shows, and it's interesting too that so many of those things you mentioned in the '90s are still prevalent here. 30 years later and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of bands you see there. The scene changes a lot more than that. I think there's a lot of reasons why people have spiritual experiences at Phish, or that it becomes a place of worship in a way. Obviously, besides when they're playing traditional Jewish liturgy or some other gospel songs that borrow from some of the other band members' own traditions. And I think one of the major ones is that Phish is playing improvisational music, so there's a lot of space between the notes of the songs and in the jams where they are having a conversation on stage and they are having a meditative moment amongst the four of them, and everyone in the audience is too. And people have said they've done a lot of thinking, they've done a lot of praying at those moments. There's music that is, there's an openness to it that allows you to kind of think and sometimes follow what they're doing, sometimes drift off and then come back. And then when they do kind of hit the end of a song, go back to the refrain or something, there kind of is this like moment of elation in the crowd. And I think another thing is that because there's this conversation between the band and the audience, it's not necessarily like you're watching a Broadway show where you're hooked on every single word and lyric. It's almost about the vibe of the place. I mean, Ed O'Brien from Radiohead has a great quote that he went to go see the band, and he said that he told Trey that he spent just as much time looking backwards at the audience as he did at what was going on stage, because it was so interesting to see how people were relating to the band, relating to the music. And he says that never happened at a Radiohead show. People would just like, oh, I love this song, let me sing along to it. And it was so beautiful that, what was going on in the last row had equal importance to what's going on stage.
There's something to be said, actually, about that improvisation.
Yeah.
I mean, so when I read about the improvisation in the book, I actually thought about the idea of nusach, right? Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, and it's not really necessarily the style of what we do as much here, because we have set songs written by set composers that we sing, though there is a kind of freedom that Cantor Greenberg has in the way that she leads. But traditionally, nusach is this idea that there is basically a scale that gets followed with some markings that, like, you have to hit certain, like, key phrases in a prayer, and for the most part, the leader just goes off and does their thing, right? And then kind of comes back and does their thing and comes back. And there's like a real kind of freedom in that, insofar as like you really get a sense that no service is ever like any others because of that freedom of that nusach. And it feels like actually like that, from what I know about traditional Jewish chant, there's a kind of jam band aspect to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and two things to touch on, and then we could let Ariella speak. But one is that Avinu Malkeinu, which is one of the two Hebrew songs that Phish plays, as we mentioned, when they were choosing to do that, there's a lot of different reasons, and Ariella has a great talk with Mike Gordon in the book about that. But one thing that Mike said was interesting is that it was a prayer where the actual music underneath the prayer or the lyrics could be changed. They could compose something and it would still be reverent and it would still feel in line. It wasn't something that was so set with the hymn and the actual Hebrew prayers. And the other idea is that, Phish is even more so than, the Grateful Dead and the Allman Brothers, was really based in American jazz tradition. That was a lot of where their improvisational roots come. And if you talk of, some of these great jazz players in the New York area or whatnot, in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, they would say that they were playing spiritual music because there was something about reaching a higher plane with their playing, and I think you can really see that in the way that these four guys interact.
And the fans do too. In fact, because of their playing, some Jewish listeners identify them as rabbis. And that's a heavy role to take on when you're, not necessarily aware of receiving the title. But I think that there are so many ways that spirituality pops up at Phish because in part of that space that's created by improvisation and by musicians who know how to build. And within this space of creativity and improvisation, of sparkly clothing and cannabis smoke, again, we're stepping out of normalcy, right? And so there's this liminal experience, this experience of being on the edge, on the verge, not fully planted within normalcy, that empowers us to look beyond, right? To embrace otherness, to connect with divinity, to connect with a sea of dancing fans. And of course, this experience is not isolated to Jewish listeners. And I want to identify that the band plays several spirituals. So they play Christian songs, including Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, but who doesn't play Swing Low, Sweet Chariot? It's unusual, again, for a band to opt to incorporate Jewish songs, but by incorporating other spiritual music, they play reggae songs that have deep spiritual meaning. The band does create the room for other religious fans to connect religiously or culturally at Phish, and yet what we see is that it's the Jewish fans that are doing this in such high numbers. And the way that we know that, the way that we know that Jewish fans are having these profoundly meaningful spiritual and communal experiences is because they're talking about them online. So if you go on to Facebook and you look up the Facebook group Gefilte Phish or Shul of Phish, because Gefilte Phish was not doing things correctly, you'll get familiarized with people who have a deep stake in navigating their Jewishness vis-a-vis Phish, and who navigate their passion for a band through their Jewish identity. So are other religious actors that are Phish fans talking about seeing God at a Phish show? Sometimes, but they're more often not talking about Phish in terms of their religiosity. And when they are, they're talking about temptations at Phish, some of which you heard about in the short piece that I read. So the elements of the Phish show that have been seen as temptations don't seem to really bother that many Jewish Phish fans, including the throngs of rabbis that have attended one or two or more shows. And so that's something that we could dig into the next time we come.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is interesting because for a number of reasons, but one of which is that for those who know a little bit about the history of Jewish thought in the 20th century, right? For the most part, Jewish mystical experience, Jewish mysticism was something that was like confined to weirdos in Tzfat and Hasidic Jews until around the 1960s. And then groups of Jews started dropping acid, and they started saying to themselves, I've had this now experience of an expanded universe of oneness, and like, how do I get back there? Do I have to keep dropping acid to get back there? And what they started realizing actually is that they could find and recreate spiritual experiences like that through mysticism, through studying Kabbalah, through meditation, through all of that. And the Jewish kind of spirituality movement was born in the mid-60s out of people who tried it through drugs, right? And so I think that there is a craving among Jews to find some kind of broader, bigger spiritual connection, some of whom can find it in this room, but others of whom need other ways to do it. And Phish is one of those ways. I mean, I talk to often my 10th graders, and Phish comes up in my confirmation class because we're talking about ways that you can feel God, right? And always I give the example of sometimes losing yourself in the midst of a broader organism, right? So you and I and you are not individuals. We now understand that the crowd lives as an organism larger than ourselves. Sometimes you have to take drugs to feel that way. Other times you just feel that way if you're in the right concert. And Phish can do that in that way too, right?
Well, I think what you're highlighting is the Victor Turner's concept of communitas. The idea that when we come together and we are in this liminal space, this space that is other than, we experience something quite profound, and it infuses us with a particular sort of energy, ruach, might I say. So I think you're such a wonderful conversation partner. Wow, can you come on tour with us? Because you're absolutely touching on that which is countercultural about the Phish spiritual experience, not only for Jewish fans, but for all of those Phish fans that find that heart space, that divine space within Phish.
I'm not going to say his exact quote while we're on the beamer here, but I encourage all of you guys to Google Drew Carey and Sphere and Phish and his thoughts on seeing God at his first Phish show this April. It's quite
Not
hilarious.
On the
Yeah.
Not on the beamer.
But one other thing I would add, and then we could.
By the way,
yeah,
the author of Go the F to Sleep did a book talk a couple of weeks ago. You can't be dirtier than him. It's fine.
You'll Google this first, but anyway. Another thing that I found talking to people about this is that Judaism is the rare religion where you can have a formal observance and a commune of people coming together outside a traditional place of worship, and it still could be authentic, and it could still meet even, there's been Hasidic people that I've seen at Phish shows who are doing Shabbat together and doing other prayers and stuff, and they're as Orthodox as it could get.
So let's talk pilgrimage. Besides the two of you who had wonderful essays, my favorite essay in the whole book compared the idea of going to a Phish show to the ancient idea of going to the temple in Jerusalem. 3 times a year, Jews would show up in the temple 2,000 years ago. They would go up to Jerusalem. They would make sacrifices. It was a spiritual high point. Everybody in Israel would show up. It was a place to see and be seen. And it was the act of going to the place that was the pilgrimage experience. And we've lost pilgrimage as a tool in Judaism today. We don't usually feel like when we travel to 936 Broad, we're making any kind of pilgrimage. But somehow Phish fulfills that. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that essay and that idea.
Absolutely. So that essay is also one of my favorites. And I think what's so beautiful about it is that it asks us to think about ritual in our lives. Beyond rituals associated with holidays, with life cycle events, what are the rituals of our lives outside of those spaces that we see as religious, as Jewish? And I hadn't really reflected on the practices that I had around going to a Phish show. I would never listen to Phish before a Phish show, like never. And I have other friends who have to listen to a particular show on their way to a show. I have a friend who wears this dress because she's been wearing this dress to Phish for 25 years. And I'm like, well, you have to wash it in between every show. She says, yeah. I'm pretty sure she does now, maybe not 20 years ago. But there are these practices, right? You get together with your friends at the same restaurant before you go to Madison Square Garden for the New Year's Eve show. You meet up with the same friends at set break at this location in the venue, right? And these are the rituals that become a part of Phish, the Phish experience, and become meaningful. They not only become meaningful as rituals, but they enhance the meaning of the Phish experience. And one of the most interesting rituals that I first noticed at Phish, which I think actually shifted my interest from having a really fun time to thinking anthropologically and sociologically about the space, was when I noticed people writing down songs in these little notebooks. Now, when I first started seeing Phish, Sure, like where are you gonna go to figure out what the set list is? You need to write it down because otherwise you're gonna forget. Your friends are stoned, they're not gonna remember. So you write it down in your little book and then you carry it around, and every time you go to a Phish show, you're like, oh, remember this show? Let me flip through, look at the set list. Now, the internet is kind of amazing, and now Phish has this incredible website that lists every single set list. So you could like go to a show and have the Phish set list up on your phone, but people are still writing it down in the notebook. Why? It's their ritual. It's part of Phish for them. It feels like a necessity, and it feels like it's getting them to a certain place, and that place takes time, it takes build, it takes the energy of a pilgrimage, right? You don't get to Jerusalem right away. You have to book your hotel. You have to make plans with your friends. Somebody is gonna be on Ticketmaster at 9 o'clock waiting for the 12 o'clock ticket release so that you can get into Jerusalem. Because really, for Phish fans, the Phish show becomes almost like a Zion, right? It is so special to be in the room, because if you're not in the room, you're going to miss a once in a lifetime. There will never be another one. You might miss a gag. Ugh, I missed last year, New Year's Eve. I was so excited to be home with my daughters. And then the band played the Gamehenge saga in totality and had a whole performance on the stage. For those of you who don't know about Gamehenge, we'll have a little session after this. It's Phish's, it's a magical tale that of lore and wonder. And it has a lot of silly characters and very powerful characters, and I missed it. I was devastated because I wasn't there. And this like sense of not being there when I missed out on that one gag, yes, this was a very crucial gag, but people feel it when they miss each Phish show, because being in a Phish show, getting there, the buildup, all the steps that you take to get to the venue, the Uber ride, high-fiving your friend, trading tickets outside, it all builds up to that moment when the lights go down and the band starts to play. And I don't think an image could capture that feeling better than the one that was on the screen when you walked into this room. For so many people, it is bliss, it is light, it is opportunity, and it is joy.
So, final question, and then we'll give you a chance to ask a few questions. And then we're gonna go next door, we're gonna have some wine and cheese, we'll listen to some more Phish together with Ebenezer, who's playing. So you have a quote in the book by a Reform rabbi who, quote, tries to replicate the experience of the shows at the synagogue to the best extent possible. So I'm curious, as a rabbi, and we have lots of people who are invested in this community here, what can synagogues learn from Phish shows, both in the communal and in the spiritual space, to better serve our congregants?
I think that it's one thing the things Phish does. Well, we've talked a lot of inside baseball and Gamehenge and rituals and stuff like that. But you know, there's plenty of people who go to a Phish show because they know the one song they do play on the radio, or they just heard Hoist when they were in camp and they have some friends going. So I think it's almost being able to meet audiences or congregates on their level and let them find a place there. There's definitely people at Phish shows who are sober, and there's like a whole sober community. There's people who do like to write down the set list. There's people who, it's the exact opposite. They like to twirl in the lobby and, you know, be completely like oblivious to what exactly is going on. And there's people who, you know, I made my interfaith dad Phish joke, but there's people who like other types of music that are coming to see Phish just because they like going to see concerts, or they heard another band cite them as a reference, maybe, you know, a younger indie rock band or something. So I think it's welcoming all different types of people and seeing what they could take from it. And then I think that will, in a sense, let them find a deeper connection to either their Judaism or to their congregation, because there's something really meaningful that they find they connect to.
So I just want to touch on 2 points. The first is that I think that the most critical thing we can bring from a Phish show into our spiritual communities is a sense of playfulness and joy. Phish is a band that is silly. You've seen a picture of a guy wearing a donut muumuu. He wears it every single show, although he has different color ways now. And he found it in a bin at a charity shop years ago, I mean in the 80s, and it became his like good luck muumuu. And so now it's just a thing they do all of these years later. We've told you about Gamehenge. I didn't really go into it, but there are a lot of silly characters. We've talked about some silly lyrics that are layered on top of profoundly complicated, intense music, right? So there's this playfulness that also is matched by extreme inquiry, by reflection, and by excellence. And so you talked earlier about how improvisation requires these rules and regulations in order to really be productive, right? It allows for freedom when you have these rules and regulations, these systems, these processes. And when you are able to take these rules, regulations, and processes and then lean into a program like this and have two bands playing in one night, that shows that there's a real focus on joyful Jewish experience. And the other point that I want to make is that that's the very reason that I decided to work on this project. I knew from the minute I met Mike all of those years ago that this project would come to be. The title of the book, This Is Your Song Too, came to me when I was at my first Phish show post-pandemic. I was masked up, I was terrified, it was an outdoor show. I made a commitment to myself to go because I needed that spiritual release. I was desperate for it, and I got into the venue and it was tight and I was totally freaked out about germs, and then there was a little bit of space and there was air and the band started to play, and then they started to play a song called Joy, in which they sing, "This is your song too." And this truly is our song too, right? This is a song of happiness. This is a song that inspires so many Jewish listeners and so many listeners beyond Jewish people to feel positivity and light, and we all need that light in these days. So.
Thank you. Let's give it up. So we have time before we head next door, and hopefully I hope you do stay because, right, it's really amazing in there. We got some good food. We've got the Uncle Ebenezer duo who's going to be playing some Phish songs. But we're going to get a few moments for some questions here for anybody who wants to ask. I'll bring a mic around because we are recording this to make sure that your question gets recorded as well.
All right. First of all, thank you to the rabbi and the cantor and Andrew for putting on this event. This is pretty sweet. I need an expert opinion here. So I would say for the last 20, 30 years, people have been trying to get me to like Phish. I'm a big music fan. I'm part of a group of dads that in Montclair where we just go to shows all the time, but I cannot get into Phish. I really want to. Is there like a show on Relisten or Spotify or something that I could download that, in your mind, just really captured the moment?
All right, I'm going to go ahead and say, instead of pointing you towards a show,
it just came to me, actually. So.
Instead of pointing you towards a Phish show, I'm going to point you towards Dave, the Little Dicky show that came out pretty recently. And in the first season, his friend goes over to his other friend's house, and they're smoking a joint together. And the one friend puts on Phish for the other friend, and the one friend says, "Okay, they sound pretty good, but when are they going to get started?" I think it's kind of like your thing or it's not, but I salute you for trying. Keep trying.
I mean, one thing I might add, though I've never become big into Phish, is because, I mean, so there are people who come to their first service at a synagogue and they say, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And there are other people who come to a service at the synagogue and have trouble connecting in. And what I tell people often is that coming to service is a little bit like a muscle sometimes. It's like, the first time you work out, you're like a little bit out of shape. And then the more you get into it, the more you get used to it, the more you begin to understand the rhythm, let's say I'm a runner, of going on a run and when it's gonna feel good. And I do wonder that sometimes, at least with services, you do have to power through. And then after you've come for a little while and you've got into practice, services can feel incredibly meaningful. And I wonder if that's a similar thing with Phish shows.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that the key is instead of just picking one song, you should go to like a 3-night run. And by the end of it, you're going to you're going to see the ups and downs and the flow and everyone all connects.
You said several. It's enough. I wish I could say it's muscle building, but.
So other questions? Other questions? Yes.
Thank you, guys. This is really fantastic. So, as a musician, to me, I have this thought and wonder whether the band, as you know, and many of you here who are Phish fans, but when we say improvisation, the thing that Phish does that most other bands don't do, and even jazz music doesn't do, is they don't improvise over the tune that they've started to play, but the 4 individual members all go on this journey occasionally. And I think we call that type 2 improvisation, I think. Is that right, Phish fans? But so the whole band is improvising and just creating, something new in that moment. So my question is there something about that is tied to Judaism as opposed to other religions? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that we kind of touched on this a little bit before, but there's definitely, a lot of dialogue or discussion or, good Jewish arguments and banter going on amongst the 4 guys. As you mentioned, you're right. It's not like, or rarely it's, okay, we're gonna take a bass solo here or a drum solo here and stretch out that way. It really is a slow, or often slow fade into a moment, and next thing you know, they're deep into XYZ song. And it doesn't have to necessarily even be a song that is usually an improvisational vehicle. It could be something that's more of a rock song, and next thing you know, they're in this very meditative, reflective place. There's maybe an endurance of the length of the shows and the high holidays that people are used to. I don't know. I feel like there is, but there's something I think about openness and discussion and kind of the ability to question, there's a lot of questioning going on, which is a Jewish value.
I think that's really insightful and actually ties really beautifully into where I went when you were asking your question, which was to the continuation of Torah, right? That's where I kind of go when I'm watching something unfold musically. Is this a teaching, right? Is this an exploration of holiness? And I know that that for me very much aligns with what happens when we gather to study, to discuss, to debate, right? It's this negotiation between people in community that we're watching unfold, listening to as it unfolds on stage. And I think, for some listeners, they would say, yeah, of course, they're studying Torah together, they're creating Torah together. But for me, I see a lot of parallels there.
All right, other questions? Yeah.
Hey guys. I think a lot about, does all of this kind of conversation, all of the content in your book, it all comes from us as the fans and as Jewish fans. And I'm curious about what the role of the band is in how we relate to the band. I don't know if that's a little too heady, but how do you think the band relates to us in how we relate to them, and what is their role?
So when you're talking about us, are you talking about Jewish Phish fans or fans?
I actually mean Jewish Phish fans, because there's so much canonization of our relationship to the band, and what's their role in this relationship?
So I think I love to start, and then you can answer that one too. I'll talk about their engagement with this project, because I think it's actually kind of indicative of where they are in this relationship that that they're very much aware of, but not the depths, perhaps, of this relationship. So I reached out to the band's management and shared this wonderful idea for this book with them, and they were gracious enough to agree to let us do it, because of course you can't just write a book about a band and use all of their lyrics without their permission. And when I shared the project with them, I was eager to interview band members, to really get their blessing beyond just like a stamp of approval. And the band management was absolutely wonderful. They were so eager to celebrate the community of fans that are highlighted in the pages of this book. And as I started having conversations with management and also specifically with Mike Gordon, I discovered that while there were certain things that the band was aware of, like the fact that, can we go forward a little bit, that Jewish fans gather to pray at Phish, we didn't even talk about that, and that Jewish Phish fans wear kippot, yarmulkes, with the donuts on them, not only when they're laying tefillin outside of a Phish show or wearing their t-shirts that say Phish in Hebrew with donuts, and their kippot to go into Madison Square Garden for the Phish show, or when they're wearing their kippahs at a wedding. This is all, it's so critical for them. And so I just want to really highlight that. And I think that the band knows about the kippah. In fact, Trey received one, right? They know that. They know that there are Phish shirts in Hebrew. But maybe they're not aware that there are rabbis gathering in hallways at MSG, Madison Square Garden. They may not be aware of the kinds of online dialogues that are taking place about Phish and Jewish identity. If we can go ahead one more. Oh, you did already. I'm so sorry. Oh. Okay, so here we have a prayer service that's actually taking place at a set break. And then you also have a prayer service that's taking place at a festival, at a Phish festival. So, they're aware that these things are happening, but not to the degree. And if you can go one slide forward, you'll see how people are really celebrating these connections between Jewishness and Phish with t-shirts that they're wearing, and the band is definitely aware of. So there's this awareness, there's this engagement, there's also this curiosity. They're like, really? They're doing all of these things? Okay. But at the same time, the band doesn't think this is super unusual and surprising because they're playing Avinu Malkeinu. And I don't know if when you listened to your Hoist album, you got all the way to the end. Did you?
I was younger. I don't remember.
Okay. If you waited,
I feel like probably because it was on while we were cleaning the bunk,
Okay, so if you probably didn't, when you were cleaning the bunk, wait the 5 minutes that you need to after the concluding track. Because if you did, you would hear some noises that kind of sound like a car crash, and then Yerushalayim Shel Zahav would come on. Also, the liner notes for that CD, they include the lyrics to Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, in all your words I am a violin. So, pretty interesting. In Hebrew, upside down. So, the band is not, totally oblivious. They're creating this space, they're leaning into it, and they're also kind of observing and not always super aware.
Can I build off the question that they had asked? Because one of the other things that I thought where you were going when you originally asked your question was about who owns the art, right? And so when you're an author, for example, you write a book, it goes out in the world, everyone actually owns your art. You don't get to own your art anymore. That's the whole thing, when George Lucas decided he didn't like the fact that at an opening scene in Star Wars, Han Solo shoots first in a duel. He actually took that away when they reissued Star Wars, and the Star Wars fans flipped out because they were like, no, this is ours now. You produced it, it's not yours anymore. And with the fan culture that's around Phish, I am curious how much you think the band feels like they own the Phish experience, as opposed to giving the Phish experience to what it has become with their fans. Because it feels to me like the experience has taken a world of its own, almost outside of the realm of anything that Trey or Mike could create, even though they're constantly adding to that experience later.
I think we talked a lot about how things have been continual throughout the band's 40 plus years. I think that's something that has actually changed, especially since they got back together in 2009. I think that up until 2004, when they broke up for a couple years, I think that they felt like they owned it a lot more than they do now. I mean, they wouldn't play a lot of songs, though there was ritual elements, and though that they celebrated their history and had these little nostalgic winks, there was also a sense of that, you know, and I get this, and a lot of bands will interview in our magazines, the same thing. When you're a band, you're making albums, you're not thinking that you haven't played this song that fans love in 10 years because you're thinking about the next thing. And I think that once they had a break and were able to get back together and kind of reflect on what they had built at that point for, 20 plus years, and it's obviously been a long time since they've broken up and gone back together. I think they've been able to kind of it's almost like anti-nostalgia. They like use these moments that celebrate their past to push themselves forward, whether it's some of these gags like breaking out Gamehenge and other stuff. So I think that's something that's changed. I think that they are now maybe more appreciative that their community feels a certain way about a song or about a certain period of their career that if you had asked them a few years back, it would have been like, no, this is our song, we're going to play it the way we want it, and yada, yada, yada.
And I will just add one more thing. One thing that I really love to think through, Trey Anastasio, the frontman, guitarist, he talks about how every single person in the concert arena has a role to play. And if one person goes to the bathroom, everything changes. So I think that really starts to answer your question from a very different angle, right? There's this sense that Jewish Phish fans are doing whatever they're doing. We're creating space for them. Wow, that's really intense what they're doing. That's fabulous, great. But there's also this sense that every single fan there, whatever choices they make, whether they gather to daven, they're praying, they're getting together with their camp friends, or they want to get a chicken sandwich when Farmhouse comes on, they shape the show. And every single person's experience, yes, spicy chicken sandwich for sure. That's where we'll meet at set break, okay? So everyone shows up to the show with what they have to offer to everyone else who's joined the experience, and everyone matters.
And that feels like the perfect way to end. So thank you very much. So, as we said before, tonight is supposed to mimic a little bit that Phish experience, which means you should be creating community. Go get your wine, go get your cheese. The Uncle Ebenezer duo is going to be starting very soon, and meet someone new tonight and enjoy the music and the food. Thank you to the two of you. Oh, and buy a book. It's in the back. Please make sure to buy a book. Yes.